you follow my vlog at all, you know I like to spend a lot of time in Los Angeles. I got friends down here, I do business down here. It's a great place to shoot, but it's a funny city because it's really spread out. So I tend to spend most of my time either downtown LA or out here at the beach. I'm at Venice Beach today, a couple miles that way, Santa Monica. There's a pier there with some amusement rides. It's super touristy, but there's a great concentration of people and ocean! Ah, ocean, it's so awesome! Now listen, I wouldn't be here filming if I wasn't doing a camera review, and I'm doing a camera review, and this time I've got the beast, the Fuji GFX. It's huge, look at it, yes! 50 megapixel monster. You know, it handles like a DSLR. It handles like a 5D Mark III or a 5D Mark IV, but it's a 50 megapixel sensor that is medium format-ish. It's smaller than 645 from the film days, but it's bigger than a full-frame 35mm sensor. So what I want to talk to you about is, how's it handle on the street? Because it's no-brainer. If you're a portrait photographer, fantastic. A landscape photographer, yes. How does a big clunky camera like this handle on the street? And that's where I come in. I've spent the last couple days shooting with it, and I gotta tell you, I didn't think it was gonna be as good as it actually is. I thought I'd have a lot of problems. I'd be working around the camera a lot of the time. But honestly, after half an hour of using it, it just felt like old hat. Felt like the camera that I've been using all along and became a no-brainer. Whoa! Whoa! Whoops. Well, we are at the beach. Anyways, I'm gonna go into a lot of detail about this camera. I'll talk about some of the specs, I'll talk about how I felt using it. But right now, this is my last day at the beach. It's my last day in LA. I'm gonna spend the last couple hours of decent light that I have shooting, and we'll talk about this when I get back to the studio. So for now, that's all I gotta say. Let me start off by saying this camera is nothing short of impressive. I mean, it took me a day or two to get used to the larger size, but once that was out of the way, this thing handled like, well, it handled like any other Fuji camera that I've ever used. I had a great time shooting with this camera. There was so much to like about it. Let's get into some of the details. And I'm back in Toronto because I've done all my shooting. And sorry, man, you know, when I went down there, I was like, I'm gonna shoot this on the beach. I'm gonna do my review on the beach. But then I was like, yeah, I'd rather just take a bunch of pictures. So I did. So we're back in Toronto. Let's talk about some of the things that make this camera the beast that it is. It is the beast. Look at it. It's huge, medium format. Before I get into all the things about this camera that I love, blah, 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 I love another camera that I'm reviewing, huge shock. Let's talk about some of the basics of the GFX. It's Fuji's 50 megapixel medium format camera. And you know, I'm an old film guy, so I would call this medium-ish format. It's medium-ish. It's not really medium format. Like, it's not the same size as a 645 negative or a 2 1/4 negative. But I mean, you take a look at the sensor and that thing is huge. Look at that. What? It's ginormous. It is beastly. So, you know, for all intents and purposes, I guess this is digital medium format. It's bigger than full frame and it's awesome. How does shooting with a large camera like this or a larger camera like this affect the way that you see the world? And I want to say no, that my vision, my Henri Cartier-Bresson mind's eye is not affected by these things. But yeah, really, I found for the first couple days that I was shooting, I was doing a lot of really formal compositions and a lot of sort of street style shots that were really mostly urban landscape. And then after a couple days, I kind of relaxed into it. I relaxed into the format, I relaxed into the feel. I wasn't thinking so much about taking medium format pictures, and I just started seeing the world I normally saw it. So yeah, initially, yeah, there was a little bump where I was like, oh Jesus, this is kind of changing the way that I see the world. And then I just started shooting the way I would shoot with anything else. But there's a strange confidence that you get from knowing you're hauling around a 50 megapixel sensor in your camera that kind of fueled me in a couple of days. I was like, tired, but let's go see. I've got the GFX. I want to take more pictures with it. And another side effect, another bonus that I didn't anticipate is when you run into other photographers and you got this thing around your neck, they're so jealous. I've got a GFX and you don't. GFX, baby. Big is better. I gotta talk about the handling. I mean, this camera now, more than any Fuji camera that I've used to date, this new grip is a little bit bigger with a nice indentation that fits my middle finger, this one, my middle finger perfectly. And there's a huge thumb thingy on the back. This camera works perfectly out of the box with one-handed operation. As I'm shooting, I can pick this up and go and get my shot right away without even thinking about it. It's a natural operation, and when it's in your hand, it's well balanced and ready to go. Since we're talking about the form factor of this camera, here's one thing. Dig this huge, because this camera, I mean, we've all seen the X1D, the Hasselblad version, and it's kind of smallish looking, it looks pretty thin. This thing's got this huge thing on the back, which, you know, the camera on one side looks like it's tiny, but then it's got this huge protrusion. And I'm like, what the H is that all about? Then I looked, and it uses these new batteries. These are the, I'm really blind, NP125 batteries. They're kind of ginormous. But dude, that's like almost the entirety of that back section. And I'm sure there's some electronic components in there, but I'm like wondering why they would design it this way. And then it occurred to me that, well, this is medium format, and medium format film guys are used to having large square film backs on their cameras. And it seems to me that they're sort of referencing that in this design. It would have been easy to design this brand new battery as a flat battery that went along the bottom, and they could have made the entire thing maybe a millimeter or two thicker and spread it all out. I'm pretty sure that that big bulky back is on purpose. You know, it's got the LCD and everything on it, but I think they're trying to make you think in terms of medium format stuff. In spite of the fact that that's there, it's still well balanced, it's very easy to carry around, and it doesn't flip forward like a DSLR. You ever use a DSLR with a decent sized lens and it's constantly flipping forward on you? And part of that is these really wonky strap lugs. You need to use a DSLR style strap on this. But the reason for that is once it's here and the camera straps around your neck, you can see it's gonna sit flat against you. So you can get this camera really easily to shoot at any point in time. It's kind of good. Let's talk about battery life. I'm the kind of shooter that keeps camera on all the time, walk around, take a shot. But I'm not shooting nonstop, and I'm not turning the camera off in between shots. I'm just walking around looking for stuff. I might take 5 pictures an hour, I might take 100 pictures an hour. It depends on what's presented to me and what I see as I'm walking around. What I found using that as a sort of baseline for what I'm talking about, honestly, getting about 100, 150 shots out of each battery. Now, I got Fuji to send me 5 batteries. I was like, I don't want to be caught dead anywhere. And honestly, for a day of shooting, I really went through maybe 2.5 batteries for a full day of shooting on the street. This is a big camera. There's a lot of electronics going on here, and it takes a bit to power it. So keep that in mind. If you are going to head out in the street with this camera, keep at least 3 batteries total, probably 4 to be safe, so you can have 1 for the morning while the other 3 are charging up. But, you know, it's not bad. Nothing to complain about there. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but nothing to complain about. It's more than functional, so get a couple batteries. What's the problem? Yeah, form factor, how it feels in the hand, blah, 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 feels great, yada, 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 50 megapixels, blah, blah, blah. What's it really like to shoot with this on the street? Like, is this responsive enough? It's Fuji. They kind of got us under control. Now, Fuji claims this camera shoots at 3 frames per second. It does, I guess. It could. But in practical terms, I found that this was about a 1 frame per second camera. In practical terms on the street. Shooting full resolution, you shoot, and then there's a little bit of a delay before the camera's really ready to get going again. I suppose you could do 3 frames per second if you didn't need to, see what's going on, or you could, I don't know. I don't know how they came up with that figure, but in practical terms, this kind of felt to me like the old days of shooting with a film Leica. You take the shot, you wind the thing. You take the shot, you wind the thing. That's about how fast you're gonna be able to shoot with this. If you're used to going it's not that. But if you're willing to have a touch of patience, if you're willing to just say, hey, okay, I understand that I'm not gonna bang off these shots, I'm gonna do a little bit more careful composition and pick my shots a little bit more carefully, there was no problem with it. Don't get me wrong, this camera is not sluggish. It's just not a speed demon like the X-T2 is a speed demon. It's not a speed demon like the Sony A9 is a speed demon. That's not what this camera is all about. But if you really wanted to use it on the street, it's fine. It works perfectly well. I was shooting, I'm on the street. I'm not standing around carefully composing every shot, waiting for someone to walk in front of the background I just created. I was in the crowd. I was shooting stuff in real time as it was unfolding in front of the camera. If I saw an interesting gesture, if I saw an interesting expression, I would bring the camera to my eye and grab it and move on to the next thing. The camera kept up with this at every turn. Let's talk about 50 megapixel resolution. It is medium-ish format. In the film days, people used medium and large format because the density of the grain kind of changed your perception of the image. It gave a little bit more weight to the image. The gradation of tones was more precise. Chances are no one's ever going to look at this at 100%. So I'm not sure if that's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo now that doesn't apply to digital medium format, but I'm looking at these files and I'm like, you know, even sized down, there just seems to be so much more substance to these images. And that's that word in air quotes. It doesn't mean, this is not quantifiable. I'm just looking at them going, man, these look really good. And the only thing I can think is that it's a 50 megapixel sensor, a big ass medium format sensor, so that when you actually size it down, the interpolation, everything has more information to work. It's all bull. This is all, I'm making all this up because I don't know if it's true, but man, the pictures from this camera look really good. I mean, here, have a look at some of the shots I did in LA. You know, by the way, we're talking about image quality. I encourage you all to go to StreetShootr.com and look at the full-size sample pictures. Don't judge the image quality of this camera by looking at the super compressed YouTube videos. That's a terrible idea. That defeats the entire purpose of photography. Go to StreetShootr.com. There's big, huge, delicious-looking image samples you can look at there. Now, here's another thing, though. Here's a weird side thing. This is not an X-Trans sensor. It's not an X-Trans sensor, but Fuji just spent all this time telling us that X-Trans sensor. You know, some people on the internet have said, oh, they've done this as a cost-saving measure to keep this camera under $10,000. The reality is, I talked to my guys at Fuji, and they said, well, the reality isn't why this doesn't have an X-Trans sensor. It's why the APS-C cameras do. The X-Trans pixel arrangement means that you can take the low-pass filter off an APS-C size sensor and not have any moire. On this camera, the 50 megapixel sensor out-resolves the moire. And this is what Fuji's telling me, and I haven't seen any problem with it when I was shooting. I didn't see one instance where I had any kind of moire. It's not that they didn't include it, they no longer need it, is what Fuji's official stance is on this. And I believe it. There's absolutely no reason. Well, I mean, I've got all the same Fuji colors. I've got all the, you know, all the Fuji goodness that I love, all the film simulation modes, all that blah, blah, blah is in there. But it's not X-Trans anymore because it just doesn't need to be. It's a 4x3 sensor. So if you're shooting in RAW, you're going to get 4x3 images, which was weird because you could crop it in post, I guess. But I was like, okay, well, let's just shoot with 4x3. What does that mean? Well, what it means, I'm normally a 3x2 guy. It basically means, you know, the horizontal field of view is the same, but now I got this much more in my image. And I started composing things in a different way. I was like, oh, well, there's volume now in the foreground. There's volume in the background. And that's not just a place to put stuff. That's not to populate the composition. But now there was a sense of depth in the shots. And I started really, even if I had like a vacant foreground, I started loving seeing so much foreground in the shot. It sort of changed my, that's the thing that probably changed the way that I was shooting the most, was this 4x3 aspect ratio. And you know, it kind of, now that the review's done and I have to pack this all up and send it back to them, I'm kind of missing it already. I went back to shooting with my X Pro 2 and I'm like, oh, this feels really cramped. I kind of want 4x3 again. So, you know, it's just a thing. I'll get over it. I'll be back to 3x2 in no time. I shot with 3x2 my entire photographic career, which is now 265,000 years. It's not the end of the world, but it was kind of fun to shoot in 4x3 for a while. If you shoot in JPEG, you can shoot 3x2 in different formats in this. You know, you're not limited to 4x3, but the sensor is 4x3, so if you're shooting RAW, it's going to come out as 4x3. And it's kind of was fun. It's just a different way of thinking of it. So yeah, something to play with if you ever get the chance. Don't turn your back to it. It opens up a whole bunch of different possibilities. But forget the actual size and shape of the image. The image quality is sublime. One of the things that contributes to that is the 14 stops of dynamic range. I don't have the spectral densitometers to test out what the actual dynamic range is, and that's not how I work. I go out and shoot with the thing and look at the picture and go, oh, no, it looks good. But I can tell you, I've got shots where I've shot full sun with full shadow, and there's detail in every aspect of the shadow and detail in every aspect of the sun. I had to reconfigure the way that I thought about post-processing because there was so much information here. And I think if I had this camera for a little longer, that would inform the way I shot even more. But as it turns out, I only had it for about a week of shooting, so it didn't change the way I shot, but it's something to, you're gonna look at these files and be like, what? I originally wanted to structure this review in a sort of, will it street format, right? You know, hey, is this gonna work on this? But you know, using it for 2 hours, I was like, oh yeah, it'll street totally fine. It's bigger than most cameras that you might use, but it's well balanced. The controls are well thought out. It worked perfectly in every opportunity that I had to use it. So yeah, it'll street. That's not the problem. The question really becomes, is this worth $10,000? I don't know. I mean, we already know I'd like one, but is it worth it? Yeah. Do you need it? No. Do I want it? Yeah. Does that make me crazy? Yeah. Fuji sort of set the industry on its side when they brought this camera out. There were two other medium-ish format cameras on the market when this hit the market, but none that had the Fuji DNA. And guys who shoot Fuji know they make some fantastically usable cameras. If you can't afford to buy one, try and rent one for a weekend. Just go and do yourself a favor, rent one for the weekend, run around, take a bunch of pictures and have a blast, look at the files. They're really that good. I'm Karl from StreetShootr, and that's enough of me. Now get out there and take some pictures already with whatever camera you have, even if it's some puny little APS-C or full frame camera when mine is so big. You know, they say it's not the size of your camera, it's what you do with it. You know, when I say they, it's people with small cameras that say, get one. This is Penny. This is Penny. Say hi, Penny. She does not like to be picked up. Penny! Hey man, if you like what I'm doing, hit the subscribe button. There's always new stuff coming up. If you like this video, so let's do Peter McKinnon style. So, if you like this video, smash that subscribe button. That's all.